Hi, this is Euphoria, the digital reader, and this is a video about what books I got and what books I read in the month of October. So first I'm going to start out with the books I got, and my general rule to help me read my back catalog of over 1,500 books is that I only allow myself to buy half as many books as I read the previous month. So in September, I read 6 books. So in October, I only bought 3 books. Well, kind of. I've really been getting hooked on BookBub, which is kind of a discount site for ebooks. And I've gotten hooked on them for 2 reasons. One, it's bringing me a lot of authors I never would have thought about. 2, lots of free books, lots of incredible prices. And 3, there are a lot of books they have that are older books that I might have wanted to put in my library, but just didn't bother because they were classics and the price was a little bit high. But here, there's a price drop, I'll jump on it. So all that to be said, although my personal rule was only buy 3 books, BookBub had 2 book series, one for 99¢ and one for $1.99. So that's 7 books for $3. I couldn't help it. I picked them up. So really, it's 3 books I bought plus the 2 series I got from BookBub is the total books I picked up this month. But I felt for $3 I could give myself a pass. So the first book I bought is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea Summers. And A Certain Hunger is basically a book about a serial killer, a female serial killer, and the book is her telling her kind of life story, kind of how she went from an idyllic childhood to becoming a serial killer. And basically she's kind of Hannibal Lecter-like serial killer, if you know what I mean. So I've heard a lot of good things about this book, and one of my favorite booktubers, Kalila, she read the book and enjoyed it, and I thought I'd definitely give it a try, so I got A Certain Hunger. The next book is a book pretty much anybody who watches BookTube knows about, and that's YellowFace by R.F. Kuang. YellowFace is the story of these 2 friends, one white, one Asian, and they're both writers. And the white friend isn't terribly successful as a writer, and the Asian friend isn't very successful as a writer. And the Asian friend dies, and the white friend basically acts like the Asian friend's work is her work, and it's kind of a deep dive into her white friend's entitlement, her underlying racism and envy of her Asian friend, and how the things she has to go through to make people believe the book is hers, and how she has to internally convince herself that what she's doing isn't like some evil, messed up stuff. So I've heard a lot of differing opinions about this book. This book is a real firebrand, and that's really the best thing you can ask about a book, is that there are a ton of people love it, a ton of people hate it, but both groups have read the book. So I picked that up. And the last book that I paid for in my kind of rule of 3 is a Shadowrun book. I'm a huge fan of Shadowrun novellas, short stories, and books. And so I almost pick one up every month, but I regularly pick them up. This one, Just Compensation. Shadowrun is called Shadowrun because it's in the far-flung future, and in the far-flung future, it is urban fantasy in that something happens in the future and elves and dwarves and dragons come back, and they're all mixed with, it's a mixture of cyberpunk, Tolkien fantasy, and futuristic science fiction, all kind of boiled into one. And it's called Shadowrun because it's based off a role-playing game, and when people do these Shadowruns, they're basically espionage missions and mercenary missions, and they're always on the dark or gray side, so they're generally not legal. So they're called Shadowrunners, and all of the stories and the game and everything is pretty much about the heroes and I guess villains who do those Shadowruns. So this person, Andy, I believe Andy Walker, is a hacker. And he's not a Shadowrunner. He's just like a normal hacker for a corporation. But he accidentally gets mixed up in a Shadowrun. And the Shadowrun he gets mixed up in has a big fallout where he basically has to fake his death and now start living in the Shadowrun world. And his experience doing that and what goes on behind the scenes that got him into that trouble and the mission he was on and what that mission meant, all those things play out through this book. So the two books I got from BookBub, book series, is I got Jasmine Webb's Charlotte Gibson Mysteries. And these kind of seem like lighthearted, comedic mysteries with Charlotte Gibson as the main character. She is a person who escaped to Hawaii because she was in trouble with a mobster. And when she escaped to Hawaii, she came to live with her mom, and her whole detective career gets started because one of her there's somebody her mom works for, a company her mom works for, who basically is giving a large reward if somebody can figure out what happened to one of their employees. And Charlotte decides, I can use that money, so she starts to look into it, and then it all clicks into place in her mysteries and the stories that are going to be in the first book and the next two. So that's pretty much what I know about it, but it sounded kind of interesting, and I've just really had a positive experience with my Lady Sherlock mysteries. So definitely more open to trying mysteries. So I got this book, these three books, and also the next book I got from BookBub, and the Charlotte Gibson mysteries, I should note, were the ones that were 99¢. And next is the Detective BLACKSTONE historical mysteries, and these are written by Sally Spencer. Once again, based off of my enjoyment of the Lady Sherlock series. Detective BLACKSTONE is a police officer in Victorian England, and these books basically follow his career through 5 mysteries that he has to unravel, and it's basically a police procedural. He's going to question the suspects, look at evidence, all that kind of stuff. So it's not so much Sherlock Holmes is brilliantly intuitive, but more kind of a hard nose to the ground detective who's going to look into the facts. I don't know whether it's more noir or more lighthearted, or really I don't know a whole lot about it, but that's the beauty of these BookBub books. Excuse me for a couple cuts. I have a train right next to me, and every now and then when it passes, especially during rush hour, and it is rush hour, it lets off its horn, so there are going to be a couple cuts just so you don't have to hear the whole horn. So anyway, this was interesting to me. With BookBub, usually I don't really know a whole lot about the books. I just kind of look at them and see if it's something I might be interested in. And generally they're so dirt cheap, I just take a flyer on them, put them in my TBR for some point in the future. Not my TBR, but I put them in my library so that when I build my 2025 TBR, then maybe this will end up in that. So now let's talk about what I actually read in October. In October, I got through 6 books. The first book was a summary of Paradise Lost by John Milton. The reason I got this summary of Paradise Lost by John Milton is because I had created a video recommending some different takes on mythology. And there was a book I read that I really liked, which was called To Reign in Hell, which was an alternate take on the Paradise Lost myth. And I have to be honest, I'm just not a person who's going to be reading epic epic poems. I couldn't be bothered to do that with the Mahabharata. I won't be bothered to do that with Beowulf. I won't be bothered to do that with Paradise Lost. What I usually will try to do is find a prose fiction version of that epic poem, you know, kind of like a translation into prose. But I couldn't really find one for Paradise Lost, and I did kind of want to know what the original story was. This was a really good summary. It kind of broke everything down, and I kind of understood the basis of the original tale. So for me, this was a perfect fix, and I got the information I needed so I could kind of say, huh, okay, I can see what they did there. This book, I guess I'm going to give it 3 stars. It's just basically kind of an information book, but you know, it definitely was useful in its way. So I'm going to go ahead and give it 3 stars because it was useful, but I can't say it was anything that, you know, really was groundbreaking. It was just a summary of the book. Next book, Lady Sherlock book. The last Lady Sherlock book I read, it was good, but I just wouldn't, if I had just read that book, that would not be the one I recommend to people. So I had given that one 3 stars. This one, they got back into stride. In this book, Lady Sherlock is based off of events that happened in the prior books. She is hiding from Moriarty, and in hiding from Moriarty, she kind of is looking for some way to ensure her safety from Moriarty. And what she does is she takes on a case for the Crown. And in taking on the case for the Crown, if she completes it, then they will consider her an agent of the Crown as far as their actions. If they'll kind of make it known that if anything happens to Sherlock Holmes, we're going to be considering her an agent of the Crown, and we're going to treat our retaliation as such. And she feels that that will help curtail Moriarty's attempts, if he makes any, to kind of get back at her. So she undertakes this case, which is on a cruise boat, and coincidentally, this cruise boat also has all of her friends, Lord Ingram, her sister Olivia, Dr. Watson. It has all those people on it. And while she's on this cruise boat trying to undertake the mission for the Crown, a murder occurs. So she has to finish this mission for the Crown so that she can get protection from the Crown. Then she's caught in this murder that she has to solve. So all that stuff is occurring on the boat, and it was just a really good read. Once again, back up to par. So I'm giving this 4 stars. The next book I read is the first volume of short stories by Edmond Hamilton. Edmond Hamilton was kind of a well-known writer in pulp fiction magazines, pulp science fiction, pulp action magazines in the 20s. And this book has 4 of his short stories. I really enjoyed this book because you kind of read these pulpy action books, and one thing I really liked is they didn't super lean into any one particular genre. There was a story about this 14th century guy who gets sent to the future. There is a story about these astronauts whose ship gets stranded in like this spaceship graveyard and how they escape. There is a story about these people who their ship is taken under false pretenses by somebody who's trying to help out a pirate, and they land on this planet, and these planets have these monsters who have special abilities. And the last one is this guy's girlfriend is kidnapped by this Cthulhu-like cult, and it's about him finding her. This book I definitely enjoyed. I like a good rousing tale or ripping yarn, and so for this book I would give it 4 stars. If somebody hadn't read pulp fiction or early pulpy magazine fiction and wanted a good sampling of different tales, this is a book I would definitely recommend to them. The next book is Hard Luck Hank, and it's by Stephen Campbell. And this is a story of Hank, and Hank is basically a thug for hire and mediator. And one of the reasons why he is a thug for hire and mediator tacked on is because in the future there are mutants who have different kind of abilities and powers, and his mutation is that he is incredibly tough. So he's able to mediate between gangs and criminals and stuff, because if things go sideways, they can't kill the messenger. So this is a story about him meeting these two other mutations and how there is an alien race after these mutations, and when the alien race comes, it creates a whole situation where now the Galactic Navy has to come to the planet, and how he deals with all of that, how he deals with it physically, how he deals with it as far as negotiating the situations that occur. It was a good book. I mean, I don't know if I would recommend it. It did kind of pick up in the second half of the book. Hank is a character who is what he is. He is not a crook with a heart of gold. He is a thug for hire at heart. And when you read the book, he is consistent with that. The story does have some interesting twists and turns. It is more on the humorous. It is a little humorous, kind of tongue-in-cheek. Well, I would say it's more tongue-in-cheek than humorous as far as human nature and how people act. This book was okay. I would give it 3 stars. I might read another one in a slow period, but as I often say, 3-star books are books where I often say this was good, but there are better books out there. So it gets my 3 stars. The next book is Corpies by Drew Hayes, and this is based in a world that Drew Hayes originally created based off a series of 4 books that I'll talk about in a video that I highly recommend if you're interested in superhero fiction or you want to dip your toe into superhero fiction. And basically, the original 4 books are about these young people going through a hero certification program, and the books are kind of built into, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, and what happens in their experience. And Corpies is kind of a spin-off based off of one of the characters who is the father of one of those college kids called Titan. And Titan is basically kind of like a Superman type toughness. He's super strong, he's super invulnerable, and he was like a legendary hero. But what happened is he had a scandal, and the scandal was such at the time that it happened that he had to retire. So now he wants to get back into being a superhero, but he really has to kind of ease back into the public perception. So he joins a group of superpowered beings called Corpies. I call them superpowered beings because Corpies are superpowered beings, but the reason they're called Corpies is I mentioned there was a hero certification program where there are people with powers who either wash out of the certification program or would have never qualified for it in the first place, but they still want to do some good. So what Corpies do is they are sponsored by corporations to help out at disaster sites and to help out in the public good and the public interest, but not to fight supervillains. So they, like I said, they do disaster relief. They help rebuild buildings. They help the fire department do things. So these are people who kind of use their powers for other reasons other than fighting supervillains. And they are sponsored by corporations because corporations realize it's a really good look if, for example, a superhero sponsored by Charmin tissue paper, there's camera footage of him saving people out of a burning building, or somebody who is sponsored by Pepsi who is helping rebuild a neighborhood that was destroyed in a superhero fight. It's about him slowly rebuilding his image, and it's about all the things that occur as he builds back up his image, as he works through working with these Corpies, because real superheroes look down on these Corpies as kind of like the D team, and he has to kind of deal with being associated with them, and also people being suspicious of him coming back into the hero game and his reasons behind it. Excellent book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. For me, this is definitely going to be a book I would give 5 stars to. And to be honest, I gave 5 stars to the 4 books that this spinoff is part of, just because I enjoy them so much. So the last book I read in October is Terry Pratchett's The Color of Magic. This is a Discworld series, and the Discworld is a series of books based in a universe where instead of a planet, everybody lives on a disc, and the disc sits on top of 4 cosmically large pachyderms that sit on a cosmically large turtle. And that is what he chose to do. And so the story is fantasy, and it's a story about a wannabe wizard called Rincewind. And he's in a city called Ankh-Morpork, and he meets this guy called Two Flowers, who is from a ancient society that's far away on the far end of the disc that people have only kind of heard of in legends. And he is an accountant from there who comes to Ankh-Morpork because he's heard stories about it, and he wants to see the bar brawls, he wants to see the heroes, the villains, all the excitement. He wants to experience all these things because he just, got tired of his life as an accountant. So these guys kind of go through the Discworld, and they have a whole bunch of hijinks and adventures. Although I love Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and this is very Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy like, it just didn't work for me. I wasn't that interested in the world. I wasn't that interested in the fantasy. It kind of felt like he didn't have any idea what he wanted to write when he started the book, and he just wrote it cold and just started making up stuff, not going back and thinking if everything connected. The world is just, I know they're all made up, but I just kind of feel like when I read about a fantasy world, I want it to seem real to me, or seem to kind of make sense. Or even if they're doing a humorous take or satire, then I want to kind of be able to chuckle at, the things they make fun of. This just wasn't that for me. It wasn't a bad book. I just wasn't that interested in the world, wasn't that interested in the characters. The stuff that happened to them was very Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy-ish, and I wasn't terribly drawn into this book. That's the best way I can put it. I was not drawn into this book. I wasn't drawn into the characters. If the rest of the Discworld books are like this, I'm good. I mean, I might read the second book, but after reading this book, I can definitely see that there will be a lot of people who could like this book and maybe have a taste for this humor. I guess I just wasn't one of them. So because of that, and because this book and the Discworld books are classics, I'm not going to give it 2 stars. I'm going to go ahead and give it 3, just because I'm going to give it the benefit that maybe it just wasn't for me. But I could not, if somebody would tell me why they love this book, I'd be happy to hear about it. It just didn't draw me in. And I think that's the key whenever you read a book, is if you're not drawn in, then you know right away it's not a book for you. So this is Ofori, the digital reader. If you have any questions, give me a holler.